Well, good morning everyone. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, just like the title describes, we have a brand new RF lens, the 75-300. Now it is a variable aperture, so I'll explain that a little bit more when I get it out and start talking to you guys about it. And stick with us, as at the end I'm going to tell you guys the price, which definitely will surprise you. So we came back up here to the Beamer Memorial Conservation Area. There's a beautiful river flowing all the way down here. Now this is my first outing with the lens, so we're going to start with a bit of autofocus and then switch to manual focus after I get the hang of it a bit more. So I'm going to bust out the tripod and try to find a composition right now. This area is just breathtaking right now, so there are a lot of images I'm seeing, and it'll be a challenge to focus in on one. So I'm going to bring the camera over so you guys can see behind here and actually see how this lens works. It is quite interesting. All right, now here's what the zoom range looks like from behind the camera. And that's all the way into 300. And then we'll come all the way back up to 75. Now we'll show it from the side so you can see this lens actually protruding out as you zoom. So, as I was saying, here we are at 75 within its most compact. As soon as we begin to zoom in, there's 200 and there's 300. You can see the barrel extends out about probably 3 inches or so. Now, as I was talking about with the variable aperture, what that means is it starts at an f4, and as you go through the zoom range, it then extends to f5.6. So we'll show you by coming in. Now, as you can see, it starts at f4 at 75 millimeters, but you see how we're at 1/40th of a second, ISO 100? As I begin to increase the zoom range, which you can see by the number right there, the aperture starts increasing. All the way up to a maximum 5.6 at 300 millimeters. And then as I rack the focus back, you can see how it climbs back down. So at 75 millimeters, we would have the most clear of image with an f4, which is pretty good. My 50 millimeter is able to go down to an f1.8, which really blows out the background. However, with this one, let's go in and check focus. Doesn't look too bad. It is able to throw the background out just a little bit out of focus. Not too much, mind you. You can still make out the trees and the shapes and everything of it. But as we zoom back into the rocks where we focused, you can see how absolute tack sharp they are. So that's what the variable aperture means. At 75 millimeters, you have an f4. And then as you zoom in, the aperture increases to f5.6. Now, there are different ranges as you go through, obviously. Once you get to 100, it now becomes f4.5. You zoom in a bit more, you get to 100 and what is this, 55, it goes to f5, and then from there all the way to 300 until it gets to 300, which is then f5.6. So I'll shut my camera off. grab my backpack and start hiking up down the river here, seeing if we can find another composition. All right, now this one we are shooting into the sun a little bit. The sun is directly right there on top, so I'm gonna have to be very careful with this. Now, the other thing to discuss is by using the 1.6 crop factor in my camera, turning it almost into an APS-C sensor, I'm able to increase the range of this from, I think it's 125 millimeters to 460. As you multiply the 75 and the 300 by 1.6 on both ends, and that gives you the range now. So I'm gonna try zooming in a good amount on this one. And now with the APS-C size sensor, this gives you the equivalent, especially at maximum here, of 460 millimeters, which is crazy. So I'm gonna try getting focus, see how it looks. Still at f/18, a quarter of a second. And I zoomed in a lot further now up to the rapids and the falls up here. Now I'm just gonna recompose to almost 300 millimeter. And then we'll try this picture. Now with the 1:1 crop, it does still utilize the full frame sensor. However, it does narrow it into a 1x1 box. So it takes away some of the excess on the sides where you can see there's some rocks and just a bunch of other stuff that we really don't care about as much. So I'm gonna now try and recompose this and see how this lens looks. Yeah, that's pretty sharp. And you can still see a lot of the ice and stuff flowing around here in the river. So this is perfect. Now, I'm gonna insert the best one in the video now. Let me know what you guys think of this picture. How does it compare to the 1.8 usually that I use? Well, the 50 millimeter lens that I usually use. As in order to zoom that one in, I can only get to 80 millimeters, or 50 times 1.6. Whereas this one now, we're able to go from 75 all the way up to 300, and if I use the APS-C, we can go all the way past that to 460 millimeters, which is a substantial zoom range. And as I was talking about earlier, now this is Canadian. This cost me 280 Canadian shekels. As lenses go, especially for the Canon RF full frame series, that is exceptionally cheap. Like that's even cheaper than Tamron or any of the other third-party lens manufacturers, because Canon doesn't allow them to make them. So as Canon put this lens out themselves, and of course it's not going to get the sharpest image. You have to understand that. It's not for like the most, well, I guess you could use it for some headshots and other things like that, but this is more or less meant for landscape. Now, I'm gonna switch it into manual focus. And I want to see how this looks. So I'm going to manually focus in on this part right there. I'm going to step this down a lot. So we are now at f4 at 1/50th of a second. So a little bit of the spot where the sunlight is streaming through, it did kind of blow out the highlights a little bit. So I'm going to darken it up 1/2 step now. We're at f4. ISO 100, now at 1/60th of a second. And we'll try taking this photo. Right where I wanted to focus, it is tack sharp, and then it starts falling off as you go to the background. Now, there is still a slight bit of blinkies on the highlights. However, that one is very small, and I guess I could step it down one more time. So we are now 1 full stop underexposed, f4 at 1/80th of a second. Now then, let's try zooming in a little bit. Now then, let's try this image. So we're at 1/50th of a second, f5.6, ISO 100. Now, because the sun is streaming in from a few different spots, I am underexposing it by 1, just to make sure we don't lose any of the highlights. And yeah, the histogram looks pretty good. All right, well, I think that's enough from this spot. I'm gonna start hiking down and up this way a little bit. Sorry, down that way and then up this way a little bit, just checking out the water's edge, seeing if we find any more compositions. Oh, well, let's keep hiking down, see if we can find any more compositions. One thing I would be remiss not to mention are the downfalls or the downsides to this lens. First of all, the most kind of egregious one is there's no form of image stabilization. So if you do anything with handheld, you will see just how shaky the camera is. Now that's nothing wrong with the actual lens or anything else. My 50mm here doesn't even have any image stabilization either. So you have to make sure that the shutter speed is high enough to freeze any of the action. And as you're looking through it, every little shimmy and shake, you will see it through the lens. Now that's where image stabilization would be very helpful in the lens. But again, I will reiterate, for 280 Canadian pesos, that really is not that bad. As with this lens, I've gotten used to it. Now, one other sort of major issue, I found a little rock here with a bunch of moss on it and kind of just different discoloration mold. So I'm going to try to take a picture of it, and we will discuss one of the other major downfalls of this camera. The minimum focusing distance of this camera is 1.9 meters, or roughly a little bit over 5 feet. Now that is quite a good distance. So if you try to focus on anything closer than that, it'll just look really soft and not be able to actually be very, very pleasant. Whereas if you're actually able to get far enough away and are able to actually incorporate something, like I have shadows from the tree being able to perfectly discolor this rock. We are at 75mm at f4, 1/160th of a second. I'm underexposing it by about half a stop to 1 stop, just to make sure I don't lose any of the highlights. Perfect. Now, one other little interesting fact. is even though this is full frame sensor, this lens only allows you to use about 85 to 90% of the area to actually focus in on. You'll see a smaller square highlighted around the actual image itself. Now that square just means the focusing area. As you cannot do edge-to-edge focusing, it's only about roughly 85, maybe 90%. So just think of a smaller rectangle inside of your entire frame, and that's all you can focus on. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, it depends. Are you trying to get things that are very edgy of your frame, or are you trying to center things into the 1/3 rule? It entirely depends on how you photograph, as well as what your expectations are. So I'm a little bit further away from the water right now, trying to stay in the sunlight to stay a little bit warmer. So that way I can also show you guys a few other downfalls of this lens. Now, as I was talking about the minimum focusing distance, as well as the lack of image stabilization, and whether or not the variable aperture bothers you, it really does depend what you're using this for. If you're taking portraits, you may want to have a bit more bokeh, so you may want to be able to step it down to a much lower aperture. So maybe f2, maybe f1.8, depending on what your lens is. I know there's a new Canon 45mm f1.4, so that would be very tack sharp and be able to just blow out the entire background. However, with this lens, this is more or less for the entry level and or for people who are just getting into zooming or zoom lenses. As the one downfall with this, well, not even really a downfall, just one of the major drawbacks from this is not an L series lens. This will not be the sharpest of sharpest, but you must temper your expectations, as for 280 bucks, you can't expect a lot. Now, one more thing I'm gonna try is on the same image, we're gonna try zooming in from the 75 to the 300 without moving the camera. You guys will be able to see just what it looks like. Now I'm gonna zoom in. Thanks for stopping by the channel today, guys. If you enjoyed this type of content and want to see more, like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys again in the next one. Have a good one.